I'm innocent. Fuck you all. You're garbage.
They were mothers, daughters, caregivers, the ones who should have protected life, not taken it. But behind their calm smiles and family photos lay some of the most horrifying crimes in human history. These are women who redefined evil, not killers in dark alleys, but in living rooms, nurseries, and family homes. They didn't stalk strangers, they destroyed the people who trusted them most. These are the most evil mothers of all time.
No blood, it's deer meat. I had a big bag there's a farm around here that does deer meat in here.
When police opened the trunk, they didn't expect to find a child. They expected groceries, maybe luggage. But what they found was the body of a little boy, shot 9 times. His name was Eli Hart. His killer was his mother. Minnesota, 2022. A gray morning settles over a quiet suburban road. A damaged car drifts across lanes, its back window shattered. When officers pull it over, they meet a young woman behind the wheel, calm, polite, detached. Her name is Julissa Thaler. She answers questions softly, almost rehearsed. But inside that car is something far from ordinary. Blood stains the seats. A shotgun case sits on the floor. And in the trunk, something wrapped in a blanket. The officer opens it. Silence fills the air. Inside lies her 6-year-old son, Eli Hart, shot 9 times. Julissa doesn't cry, she doesn't look away, she simply stares, expressionless, as if reality no longer applies. To understand what led to that trunk, you have to go back to the fight that consumed her life. Julissa had been battling for custody of Eli. Her life was chaos, meth addiction, paranoia, emotional collapse. Eli's father, Torrey Hart, warned the courts again and again. He said she was using drugs, that she was unstable, that their son was afraid. For a time, the state listened. Eli was placed in foster care. He laughed again, slept peacefully, and began to heal. Then Julissa convinced social workers she had changed. She claimed sobriety, therapy, and a new start. And in early 2022, the court believed her. The papers were signed. Eli went home. 3 weeks later, he was dead. May 19th. Neighbors saw Julissa loading her car late at night. She moved fast, agitated. Eli stood beside her, still in pajamas, clutching a small toy car. No one intervened. It looked like a mother and son heading out for a drive. Inside that car sat a loaded shotgun. She had bought shells days earlier, telling a friend they were for protection. Somewhere on an empty road outside Minnetonka, Julissa looked in the mirror, saw her son's reflection, and pulled the trigger. Once, then again, 9 times in total. 9 shots that ended a child's life. When the gun clicked empty, she kept driving. By morning, Julissa was still behind the wheel. She stopped for gas, bought coffee, and smiled at strangers. In the trunk, Eli's body lay wrapped in a blanket. When police pulled her over for reckless driving, she told them she was visiting a friend. Asked about the blood, she said she had hit a deer. But deer do not bleed from shotgun shells, and they do not wear Spider-Man pajamas. Shell casings covered the seat. Her hands were stained with gunpowder. When the trunk opened, the truth came out. Detectives said she was disturbingly calm. No tears, no denial, just silence. Her phone showed searches about shotguns, custody laws, and cleaning blood from a car. This wasn't chaos. It was planning, not madness. Method. In court, the photos were unbearable. The car, the weapon, the small body found inside. Prosecutors said she killed out of control and revenge. If she couldn't have Eli, no one would. The defense claimed psychosis, saying she was delusional, hearing voices. But the jury saw through it. This was choice, not confusion. When found guilty of first-degree murder, Julissa barely moved. She showed no emotion as she was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Eli's father stood before the court, holding his son's photo. Through tears, he said, "He just wanted to make people smile." The case shocked Minnesota. How could a system ignore so many warnings? How could a little boy say he was scared and still be sent home? Officials blame miscommunication, but bureaucracy cannot explain evil. Eli's death became a symbol of everything broken, of compassion that replaced caution, and blind faith that cost a life. Psychologists later called her mindset maternal possession. Julissa saw Eli not as a person, but as a piece of herself. When she felt him slipping away, she did the only thing her twisted logic could allow. She made him hers forever. Death became ownership, Her silence after the murder wasn't guilt, it was satisfaction, the quiet certainty that she had finally won. That trunk became a symbol of denial, a small metal coffin she drove with for hours, gas stations, coffee stops, ordinary moments against a backdrop of horror. She pretended everything was normal, but the truth sat behind her, cold, still, irreversible. When police lifted the blanket, they didn't just uncover a body, they uncovered the end of innocence. Evil doesn't always scream, one detective said. Sometimes it drives to the store like nothing happened. Julissa Thaler's story isn't only about murder, it's about control, possession, and the destruction of a bond meant to protect. She wasn't a shadow in an alley, she was the woman next door, the one who waved to neighbors, then drove home with death in her trunk. In her mind, she hadn't lost control. She had reclaimed it, forever. Julissa Thaler killed out of fear of losing control. But the next mother didn't fear losing control. She wanted profit. And for greed and attention, she staged one of the cruelest deceptions in British history. Her name was Karen Matthews.
It's just because it's hard. I'm not being here now. It's just got 3 weeks tomorrow and it's just hard.
She stood before cameras, trembling, crying, begging strangers to help find her missing daughter. But the person she was, really pleading with, was herself. West Yorkshire, England. February 2008. A gray sky hangs low over Dewsbury Moor, a quiet working-class town where everyone knows everyone. One of them was Karen Matthews, a 32-year-old single mother of 7, struggling through poverty, chaos, and noise. That afternoon, her 9-year-old daughter Shannon left school and started her short walk home. Somewhere between the classroom and her front door, she disappeared. Within hours, panic took hold. Neighbors searched the fields, volunteers handed out flyers, the local church became a command post. And at the center of it all stood Karen, eyes red, voice shaking, holding a photo of her missing child. "Please, if you have my baby, bring her home. She's just a little girl." Her words sounded real, her pain looked genuine, and Britain believed her. It was less than a year after the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, and the country was still haunted by that case. Now there was another missing child, and this time it was one of their own. The media flooded Dewsbury Moor. Donations came pouring in. The government offered a £50,000 reward. Karen appeared on television night after night, crying, praying, thanking the public. But detectives began to notice cracks. Her story shifted from interview to interview. Her emotions seemed rehearsed, almost timed for the cameras. And behind the scenes, she was seen laughing, joking, even drinking at the pub, while search parties combed the streets for her daughter. Her phone records revealed constant calls to a man named Michael Donovan, her boyfriend's uncle. When police questioned him, he appeared anxious, sweating, eyes flicking toward the stairs. Then came a sound, faint, muffled, a child's voice. Officers tore open the base of his bed, and there, hidden inside, was Shannon, alive, terrified, drugged. For a brief moment, Britain celebrated. The missing girl was safe. Her mother's tears of joy filled every news broadcast, but the relief didn't last, because Shannon's rescue wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of the truth. Donovan confessed that Karen had planned the kidnapping herself. The goal was simple: stage her daughter's abduction, collect the £50,000 reward, then find Shannon later and become a national hero. Karen had studied television coverage of the McCann case, learning how to cry, when to tremble, and what phrases made people care. She had turned grief into performance. And for 24 days, the country believed every word. When the truth broke, the nation turned on her overnight. The same neighbors who had searched the woods ripped down her posters. The same reporters who comforted her now called her a monster. Karen Matthews wasn't just a liar. She was a mother who used her child's suffering to chase fame. The outrage was personal because everyone had cared. They had searched, donated, prayed, and she had made it all a lie. When Shannon spoke to police, her story shattered hearts. She had been told to stay quiet, to hide, to play a game. She didn't know her own mother had orchestrated it all. In 2009, Karen and Michael Donovan went to trial. The prosecution laid out the plan in detail. The sedatives, the belts used to restrain the girl, the phone calls, the timing. It was selfish, sloppy, cruel. The jury took less than 2 days to convict them both. Karen was sentenced to 8 years in prison. The judge told her she had committed a wicked and callous hoax, betraying not only her child, but the entire country that had believed her. Even then, she showed no remorse, no apology, just the same blank stare that once fooled millions. After the trial, Shannon was placed under witness protection, given a new name, a new home, and a new life, far from the mother who had treated her like a lottery ticket. The little girl who Britain had searched for had to disappear again, this time to survive. Psychologists later described Karen as manipulative, self-centered, and hungry for attention. She wasn't intelligent, but she was cunning enough to mimic empathy. Her tears weren't sadness, they were strategy. Her crime wasn't impulsive, it was rehearsed, a performance built on deception and fueled by envy. When she was released after serving half her sentence, there was no homecoming, no welcome. She had become a ghost, a living reminder of how easily sympathy can be exploited. Karen Matthews destroyed more than trust. She left behind a legacy of doubt. After her, every missing child appeal carried a shadow, a quiet, cruel whisper, asking if it could all be another act. She didn't kill her child, one detective said, but she killed something just as fragile: belief. Her story is not one of poverty or desperation. It is about greed. The hunger to be seen, to be pitied, to matter, even at the expense of her own child. She turned motherhood into theater, pain into spectacle, and compassion into currency. In the end, she wasn't the grieving mother she pretended to be. She was the villain, playing the role of the victim. Karen Matthews lied to gain freedom through deception, but the next mother didn't lie. She killed for it. Her name was Louise Porton, and to her, motherhood wasn't sacred. It was an inconvenience to be erased. She smiled in every photo, a young mother, proud, glamorous, holding her two little girls. But behind that smile was exhaustion and resentment, because to her, motherhood wasn't love. It was an inconvenience, one she would soon erase. Rugby, England. January 2018. The sound of emergency sirens cuts through the winter night. Paramedics arrive at a small apartment where a young woman stands calmly in the doorway. Her name is Louise Porton. She is 23 years old, composed, polite, and disturbingly detached. Inside the flat, her 3-year-old daughter Lexi lies motionless. Louise tells the medics her child just stopped breathing. She cries softly, but without tears. To the untrained eye, it looks like tragedy. To those who looked closer, it was something else entirely. Less than 3 weeks later, her second daughter, Scarlett, is dead too. 2 little girls, both gone before their 4th birthdays, both under the care of their mother. At first, the deaths seemed coincidental. Maybe illness, maybe fate. Louise told everyone she was cursed, that God was punishing her. She posted on Facebook about her beautiful angels in heaven, receiving floods of sympathy from strangers. But police weren't convinced. They noticed her calm demeanor, her lack of emotion, her phone activity. In the hours after Lexi's death, she had been messaging men online, sending selfies, arranging dates. The night Scarlett died, she was on a dating app again, flirting, smiling, posing for pictures, as her child lay dying in the next room. Detectives began piecing together a pattern. Louise saw motherhood not as duty, but as a prison. She wanted freedom, to party, to travel, to post selfies without guilt. Her daughters weren't part of that image. They were obstacles. Friends told investigators she often complained about being tired of the kids, that she said she needed space, and joked that life would be easier without them. It wasn't a joke. On the night of Lexi's death, she had been alone in the flat. There were no signs of struggle, no intruder. Doctors later found evidence of suffocation, subtle bruising, internal damage. It looked deliberate. 3 weeks later, history repeated itself. Scarlett's cause of death mirrored her sister's almost exactly. Once could be tragedy, twice was murder. Police arrested Louise Porton at her home. When questioned, she smiled faintly and said, "I loved my girls. I'd never hurt them." But her phone told a different story. Hundreds of messages, photos in skimpy outfits, conversations with multiple men, all sent in the days surrounding both deaths. One message read, "I'm so done with being a mom." Another, "I can't do this anymore." Forensic experts found that she had searched how long it takes for a child to stop breathing. She had looked up resuscitation techniques, not to save lives, but to mimic an attempt. She killed Lexi, then she killed Scarlett, and afterward, she went back to texting. During her trial, the courtroom sat in silence as the evidence unfolded. Images of the two little girls smiling, alive and joyful, filled the screen. Then came the timeline: 2 deaths, 18 days apart, and a mother who saw both as opportunities for freedom. The prosecution said she viewed her daughters as a burden standing in the way of her lifestyle. Her motive wasn't rage or insanity. It was selfishness. Cold, calculated selfishness. The defense claimed stress, exhaustion, depression. They said she was overwhelmed, but stress doesn't suffocate. Exhaustion doesn't Google how to fake CPR. When the jury returned their verdict, guilty of murdering both her daughters, Louise showed no reaction, no tears, just the same faint smile that had fooled everyone before. She was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 32 years. As she was led away, one of the detectives whispered, "I have never seen a colder woman in my career." Her story left the nation stunned, not because of the violence, but because of the void. There was no passion, no breakdown, no madness, just absence. A woman so hollow that even love had no place inside her. Forensic psychologists called it narcissistic detachment. Louise saw her children as extensions of herself, not as people. When they interfered with her desires, she deleted them, like messages she no longer wanted to read. Her life after their deaths showed no remorse. She continued to flirt online, posting photos, smiling in every one. She was free now, in the only way she understood freedom. The nation asked the same question over and over: how could a mother do this? The answer was as chilling as it was simple. She didn't see herself as a mother. She saw herself as a woman trapped by responsibility, and to escape, she killed the very ones who made her one. Her story exposed something darker than anger. It revealed the danger of apathy. What happens when someone feels nothing at all? She didn't lash out, she didn't scream, she simply decided, and then she smiled. Louise Porton murdered her daughters because they got in the way of her life, one juror said. She thought freedom meant absence. She thought love could be replaced by attention. But freedom built on loss isn't freedom, it's emptiness, and attention fades. Louise will grow old behind bars, remembered not for her beauty, not for her charm, but for the chilling silence she left behind. Karen Matthews lied for sympathy. Louise Porton killed for convenience. But the next woman used her intelligence and her medical training to end a life and walk away smiling. Her name was Shirley Turner. She was a doctor, calm, intelligent, trusted, a woman sworn to save lives, but the one life she chose to take was her own child's. Newfoundland, Canada, November 2001. The early morning air is sharp and still. A parked car sits by the edge of Conception Bay, headlights on, engine silent. Inside is a woman holding her baby. Her name is Dr. Shirley Turner, 36 years old, brilliant, respected, and smiling in every photo. In her arms, 1-year-old Zachary sleeps peacefully. He doesn't know his mother has just given him a fatal dose of medication. Minutes later, she steps into the cold Atlantic and disappears beneath the waves. When rescuers find them, she's still holding him, a doctor's final embrace. One of death, not love. Years before that morning, Shirley was known for ambition. She was confident, admired, and deeply manipulative. She knew how to charm, how to deceive, how to make people believe. In Pennsylvania, she met Dr. Andrew Bagby, a kind and compassionate man. Their relationship began intensely and ended violently. When Andrew tried to leave her, she became obsessed. She followed him, harassed him, and left angry messages that swung between love and rage. One night, Andrew agreed to meet her in a park. Hours later, he was found dead, shot 5 times. The bullets matched her gun. Her phone records placed her at the scene. When police tried to question her, she fled back to Canada. Then came the revelation. She was pregnant. The father was Andrew Bagby. The baby, Zachary, was born while Shirley awaited extradition for Andrew's murder. Andrew's parents, David and Kate Bagby, wanted to protect him. They begged the courts for custody, knowing what Shirley had already done. But Canada's justice system failed them. Judges said she wasn't dangerous. They called her cooperative. They released her again and again. David and Kate pleaded with everyone who would listen. They told social workers, "She will kill him. Please, she will kill him." But no one stopped her. Shirley played her role perfectly. The grieving mother, soft-spoken and professional. She smiled in court, used her medical degree as armor, and convinced judges she was the victim. And so she walked free, with her son. For over a year, she played at motherhood. To the world, she looked gentle and loving. But resentment grew beneath the surface. She despised Andrew's parents for their bond with Zachary. She hated the thought that they were raising him with love, the kind she couldn't give. Her need for control became an obsession. If she couldn't have her son fully, then no one would. In August 2003, she called a friend and said, "I'm sorry for what's going to happen." Then she gave Zachary sleeping pills, waited for him to drift off, and drove to Conception Bay. There, she stepped into the ocean with him in her arms and never came back. When news reached David and Kate, they collapsed. They had already buried their son. Now, they would bury his child too. It wasn't an act of love, it was vengeance, a mother's final weapon. Her suicide note was short. "I'm sorry, I can't live without him." But she hadn't killed herself out of grief. She had killed to punish those who loved him most. The system called it unforeseeable, but for the Bagbys, it was inevitable. They had warned everyone, begged everyone. No one had listened. Their grief turned into purpose. They campaigned for change, a new law to ensure that violent offenders could not walk free while awaiting trial. It became known as Zachary's Bill, and it carried the name of the child the law could not save. Shirley Turner's. Evil wasn't loud. It was methodical. She didn't scream or rage. She smiled. She planned. She waited. Her intelligence made her deadly. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she believed she had the right to do it. Psychologists called her narcissistic, obsessed with control, incapable of empathy. She didn't see her son as a life. She saw him as leverage. When she realized she could no longer use him, she destroyed him. She was a doctor trained to save lives, one detective said, but when she chose to take one, she did it with precision and purpose. Shirley Turner thought she was proving love, but what she proved instead was power, the cold, final power of control. She took her son's life, her own life, and any chance of redemption, but in doing so, she left behind a law that now carries his name, a reminder that systems can fail, but truth cannot stay silent forever. Shirley Turner killed out of vengeance and pride, but the next mother killed out of despair, a woman who turned her rage inward, taking the lives of her 4 sons before ending her own. Her name was Susan Eubanks. In the quiet suburbs of San Marcos, California, neighbors heard laughter, then gunshots. When the police arrived, they found a mother sitting alone, 4 children dead at her feet. Her name was Susan Eubanks, and she believed that if she couldn't live in peace, neither could they. November 2nd, 1997. A small single-story home in Southern California stands lit from within, its windows glowing against the night. Inside, Susan Eubanks, a 33-year-old mother, is drinking, pacing, and muttering to herself. Her 4 sons, Brandon, Austin, Brigham, and Matthew, range in age from 14 to 4. They are quiet that night. They have learned to stay quiet when their mother drinks. Outside, the neighbors hear arguing, a man's voice, then silence. Moments later, 4 gunshots echo through the neighborhood. When police enter the home, they find Susan on the floor, a revolver beside her, a gunshot wound in her abdomen, self-inflicted but shallow. She's still alive. Her sons are not. Each has been shot once, execution style, 2 on the couch, 1 in a bedroom, 1 on the floor beside his toys. On the wall, written in lipstick, are the words, "I love you, boys." It takes only minutes to understand what happened, but a lifetime to ask why. Susan Eubanks wasn't born a monster. She was born into chaos. A turbulent childhood marked by abuse, addiction, and instability. By her teens, she was drinking heavily, using drugs, and bouncing between boyfriends. By her 20s, she had children she couldn't care for, and partners she couldn't trust. Her temper was legendary. Friends described her as beautiful but cruel, a woman who could charm and destroy in the same breath. She was jealous, volatile, and every failed relationship ended in violence or threats. In the months before the murders, she was spiraling. She had lost her job, her car, her home, her boyfriend had left, and she believed everyone, her ex-husbands, her lovers, the world, had betrayed her. On that November night, the betrayal turned to vengeance. Investigators later pieced together her movements that day. She spent hours drinking, taking taking prescription pills and calling her ex-boyfriend, screaming threats. She told him she would make him pay. She told relatives, "If I can't have my kids, no one will." By evening, she loaded her gun. She walked room to room, calm and deliberate. The children trusted her. They didn't know what was coming. After shooting them all, she turned the gun on herself. But instead of dying, she survived. And when paramedics arrived, she said something that chilled them forever. "Now they'll all be sorry." At first, police thought she was delirious, but she wasn't. She meant every word. Her murders weren't impulsive, they were punishment. A statement to the men who had left her, a final act of control over the only people she still commanded. During interrogation, Susan showed no emotion. She spoke of the shootings like describing a dream. She claimed she had been suicidal, that she wanted to take the boys with her. But her tone was flat, her words rehearsed. She wasn't remorseful, she was satisfied. At trial, the courtroom fell silent as photos of the 4 boys appeared on screen. Their school portraits, their small faces, their futures already taken. The prosecutor described the murders as revenge disguised as despair. Her defense argued mental illness, depression, intoxication, emotional collapse. But the evidence told another story. She had arranged the house, written the note, loaded the gun, and shot each child with precision. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours before finding her guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to death. As the verdict was read, she showed no reaction. Only when she was led away did she whisper, "I'm the victim here." In prison, Susan Eubanks remains on death row. She rarely speaks. Those who've interviewed her describe an eerie calm, a woman who sees herself not as a killer, but as someone wronged by life. Psychologists called it pathological narcissism. She saw her children not as individuals, but as extensions of herself, to be loved when they pleased her and destroyed when they didn't. She wasn't trying to save them from suffering. She was trying to make the world suffer with her. Her crime wasn't born from madness, but from wounded pride. When her relationships fell apart, she chose to annihilate everything tied to her name. To her, death was justice. And justice meant everyone else's pain. "I love you, boys." 4 words scrawled in lipstick on a wall. The last message of a mother who believed love was ownership. She took what was never hers to take and left behind a silence that still haunts San Marcos to this day. Susan Eubanks killed out of rage and revenge, one detective said. But what makes her different is that she didn't try to hide it. She wanted everyone to see what she had done. Susan Eubanks became a symbol of the darkest kind of maternal violence, the deliberate destruction of innocence, the transformation of love into a weapon. And yet, even after all of it, she insists she was the real victim. Susan Eubanks killed because she believed her life was over. But the next woman killed because she believed life itself was too full. A woman who brought 8 children into the world, then smothered them with her own hands. Her name was Dominique Cottrez. For years, a quiet woman lived an ordinary life in a small French village. She went to work, paid her bills, waved to her neighbors. But beneath her garden lay a secret so horrifying it would shock an entire nation. Villers-au-Tertre, northern France. A summer afternoon in 2010. A couple is doing renovation work on a home they recently purchased, a modest farmhouse once owned by the Cottrez family. While digging in the garden, the husband strikes something hard. He brushes away the dirt and finds plastic. Then cloth. Then something else. Pale, small, and unmistakably human. Police are called immediately. The yard is sealed off. 1 body becomes 2, then 4, then 8. 8 newborn babies buried in the soil, wrapped in plastic bags and hidden for years. The discovery horrifies France. How could anyone do this? Who could carry 8 pregnancies, 8 lives, and end them all in silence? The answer is Dominique Cottrez, a 55-year-old nurse's aide and mother of 2 grown daughters. She is known in town as gentle, quiet, helpful, the woman who cared for the elderly and smiled at everyone. When police knock on her door, she doesn't run. She doesn't cry. She simply says, "Yes, they are mine." At first, no one believes her. She doesn't fit the image of a killer. She's not angry, not unstable, not desperate, just calm. During questioning, she explains everything with chilling composure. For nearly 20 years, she had hidden her pregnancies from her husband, from her family, from everyone. Each time she gave birth in secret, alone, and killed the newborn immediately after. 8 times. Her confession is so matter-of-fact that detectives are stunned. When asked why, she gives a simple, haunting answer. "I didn't want any more children. I couldn't have more." She explains that her relationship with her father had been abusive, that he had controlled her since childhood, and that she feared him even as an adult. When she fell pregnant again after marriage, she said she couldn't bear to bring more children into the world. Children she believed were tainted by her past, but investigators found no evidence of active abuse during those years. Her father had long since died. So, if she feared him, it was a ghost she was obeying, a shadow that had become her prison. Her husband claimed he never knew. He said she wore loose clothes, blamed her weight, and disappeared briefly during each birth. And somehow, for decades, no one noticed. Friends described her as distant but kind. Her 2 living daughters said she was a loving mother, strict but caring. They had no idea what their mother had done. The murders spanned nearly 17 years. 8 babies, buried in 2 gardens, their remains resting just meters from where she slept every night. The public struggled to understand. Was she a monster or a woman crushed under years of silence and shame? Psychiatrists who examined her were divided. Some called her cold, narcissistic, manipulative. Others said she was traumatized, living under psychological domination from a long-dead father. She herself showed no emotion. She didn't cry when shown photos of the graves. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply said, "I couldn't stop. I thought it was better this way." Her tone was flat, the tone of someone who had long since stopped feeling anything. Her trial in 2015 became one of the most shocking in French history. Crowds filled the courtroom, reporters describing her as the woman who buried her children and her conscience. When the prosecutor read out the timeline, 8 pregnancies, 8 killings, 8 burials, the silence was suffocating. Dominique spoke softly. She said she never wanted to be pregnant again, that contraception had failed, that she couldn't face the shame of telling anyone. The judge asked, "You could have gone to a hospital, to the police, to your husband. Why didn't you?" Her answer was chilling in its simplicity. "Because I didn't want them." Experts called it pregnancy denial taken to its darkest extreme, a psychological condition where the body hides pregnancy and the mind refuses to acknowledge it until the moment of birth. But in Dominique's case, it wasn't denial, it was decision. Each killing was a choice, calm, controlled, repeated. When the verdict was read, the judge called her actions the ultimate betrayal of motherhood. She was sentenced to 9 years in prison, a sentence many considered far too light. She served only part of it before being released quietly, returning to a life of anonymity. Dominique Cottrez never sought attention. She didn't crave fame or pity. She simply wanted silence, and for nearly 2 decades she had it. Her story forces a question most people never want to ask. How much evil can hide behind normality? She wasn't a shadow in an alley. She was the woman next door, baking bread, smiling at neighbors, while 8 graves slept beneath her garden. She didn't kill for revenge, one psychiatrist said. She killed because it was easier than telling the truth. Dominique Cottrez killed to erase her past, but the next mother killed to erase her pain. A woman who believed she was saving her children from the world's cruelty, only to become its very embodiment. Her name was Brittany Pilkington.
Takes responsibility for the death of the children by pleading guilty to these charges today.
She said she wanted to save them. She said the world was too cruel. But when the police entered her home, they found what she had really done: 3 tiny bodies and one mother who believed mercy meant murder. Bellefontaine, Ohio, August 2015. A quiet street in a small Midwestern town. The kind of place where children ride bikes until sunset, and everyone knows everyone else. At least, that's what people thought, until they met Brittany Pilkington. At first glance, she seemed ordinary. 23 years old, soft-spoken, a stay-at-home mom with 3 children, 2 boys, Noah and Gavin, and a baby girl named Haley. To her neighbors, she was quiet, polite, maybe a little distant. To police, she would soon become the face of something unthinkable. On the morning of August 18th, officers were called to her home after a report of an unresponsive child. Inside, they found Gavin, 3 years old, lying lifeless in his bed, his skin pale, no signs of struggle. Brittany stood nearby, calm, almost detached. She whispered, "He just stopped breathing." It sounded familiar, too familiar. Just months earlier, her infant son Niall had died in the same home, under the same mysterious circumstances. Doctors had ruled it as sudden infant death syndrome. And a year before that, her 3-month-old son Noah had also died. 3 boys, 3 deaths, all before their 4th birthdays. When detectives returned to the house, something felt wrong. There were no signs of trauma, no evidence of abuse, no drugs, no poisons, just a mother who seemed too calm, too quiet. Hours later, in an interrogation room, Brittany finally spoke, and what she said stunned even the most seasoned officers. "I did it," she said softly. "I killed them. I just wanted them to be safe." Her words hung in the air, fragile and horrifying. She explained that she had smothered her sons with blankets as they slept, each time while her husband, Joseph, was at work. She said she waited until the house was silent, then pressed her hands down and held them there until the movement stopped. When asked why, she answered, "Because I couldn't let them grow up like him." Brittany's life had been marked by trauma long before she became a mother. She grew up in poverty, neglected, and often abused. At 16, she began a relationship with Joseph, a man twice her age, her father's friend. He later became her husband. Their relationship was one of control and fear. She said Joseph favored their boys, spoiling them, while ignoring her and their daughter. She believed he wanted them to grow up just like him, cruel, selfish, abusive. And in her twisted logic, she convinced herself she was protecting them. "I didn't want them to hurt people," she told police. "I didn't want them to end up like their father." Psychologists called it altruistic filicide, the belief that killing your children saves them from suffering. But in Brittany's case, it was more complicated. It wasn't just mercy, it was despair, a life so full of control and fear that death seemed like freedom. When investigators asked how she felt afterward, she said, "Peaceful, like it was over. No panic, no regret, only release." Her confession sent shockwaves through Ohio. Reporters described her as the mother who thought death was love. People wanted to hate her, but when they saw her on the stand, frail, trembling, eyes vacant, many couldn't decide whether she was evil or broken. Her defense argued trauma and mental illness. Years of abuse, depression, and manipulation had left her incapable of rational thought. The prosecution called it murder, 3 deliberate acts, 3 lives taken by choice. They were both right. She was broken, and she was deadly. In 2021, after years of delays and psychiatric evaluations, Brittany Pilkington pleaded guilty to 3 counts of manslaughter. The death penalty was taken off the table. She was sentenced to 37 years in prison. In court, she said softly, "I'm sorry. I just wanted to save them." Her husband never forgave her. Their daughter Haley was placed in foster care, growing up with no parents, no brothers, and no answers. Behind bars, Brittany spends her days in isolation. She rarely speaks. Sometimes she writes letters to Haley, letters that are never sent. She writes about dreams where her sons visit her, smiling, telling her they're safe. To her, those dreams are proof she did the right thing. To the rest of the world, they're proof she can never understand what she's done. She didn't kill because she hated them, one detective said. She killed because she hated the life she gave them. Her story forces a question few can answer. Can mercy ever be evil? And when love turns to fear, what part of a mother survives? Brittany Pilkington believed she was saving her sons from pain, but all she did was ensure the world would remember their names for the way they died, not the way they lived. Her home in Bellefontaine was demolished years later. The land stands empty now, a quiet scar where innocence once slept. Brittany Pilkington killed out of despair, but the next mother killed out of madness. A woman who built her home into a prison for her children, torturing them in the name of faith. Her name was Klara Maurova. She called it faith, she called it love, but inside her home, faith became obedience and love became torture. Kujim, Czech Republic, May 2007. A suburban street lined with modest houses and small gardens. It's quiet, the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happens. Until one evening, man testing a new baby monitor in his home picked up a signal from another house nearby. At first, he heard static. Then he saw an image that froze him. A boy, naked, bruised, crying, locked inside a small metal cage. He called the police immediately. When officers raided the nearby home, they found Klara Mawerova, a 31-year-old mother, and two small boys, Andrei and Jakub. At first glance, the boys appeared weak but alive. But as officers explored the house, the truth began to unravel like a nightmare. Hidden behind a door was the cage. Inside it, dried blood, torn clothing, a child's drawings, signs of long-term abuse. The boys were removed instantly. Their mother was arrested. And what began as a simple child abuse case soon became one of the most disturbing stories in Europe. Klara was not the typical monster. She was intelligent, gentle in appearance, a devoted single mother who raised her sons with affection, at least on the surface. She was also a devout follower of a small, secretive religious group called the Grail Movement. The group preached strict obedience, purity, and punishment. Members believed suffering could cleanse the soul. Klara took this to heart, and far beyond. She began attending meetings led by a woman named Barbora Shkrlova, a manipulative figure who claimed to be spiritually gifted. Barbora was charismatic, strange, and soon became part of Klara's family. She told Klara that her sons were possessed by evil, that they needed discipline to purify their hearts. And Klara believed her. Over months, the home turned into a house of horror. The boys were locked in a small chamber, starved, burned, beaten, and forced to eat their own waste. Sometimes Klara participated, sometimes she simply watched. Barbora directed it all, convincing Klara that this was God's will, that the pain was a path to salvation. The boys cried for help, but their mother told them it was punishment for their sins. One night, the younger boy whispered through tears, "Please, Mom, I'll be good." Her response was silence. The discovery shocked the nation, but the story grew even stranger. When police arrested Barbora, they discovered she had been living under a false identity, pretending to be a 13-year-old girl named Anika. She had even enrolled in a local school, fooling teachers and classmates, despite being in her 30s. It was a web of lies, control, and delusion, and Klara was trapped at its center. Investigators later revealed that Barbora was part of a cult-like network that preyed on vulnerable people, especially women. They isolated followers, convinced them they were saving souls, and used psychological manipulation to enforce obedience. Klara's devotion turned to madness. She surrendered her will completely. By the time police arrived, she could no longer tell right from wrong. At trial, prosecutors described the case as organized sadism under the mask of faith. The evidence was overwhelming: photos, journal entries, and the testimony of her own sons. They spoke softly, trembling, describing years of imprisonment and pain, how their mother held them down while others hurt them, how they thought that they would never be free. The courtroom fell silent when Jakub said, "We still love her. She is our mom." Klara sobbed for the first time. Psychologists said she suffered from shared psychosis, a rare condition where a dominant personality transfers their delusions to another. Barbora was the leader. Klara was the follower. She believed the abuse was divine purpose. But the law didn't see delusion. It saw choice. In 2008, Klara Mawerova was sentenced to 9 years in prison for child abuse and torture. Her sister Katerina and members of the cult received similar sentences. Barbora, the manipulator behind it all, was convicted as well, though she served less than 5 years. When Klara was released, she returned to a quiet life under a new name. Her sons, now adults, refused to speak publicly. They live in anonymity, forever marked by what their mother did, and what she allowed to happen. The case left a deep scar on the Czech Republic, not only for its cruelty, but for its question of faith. How belief in the wrong hands can become the language of evil. Klara Mawerova was not insane in the medical sense. She was consumed. She traded morality for obedience and motherhood for submission. She wasn't possessed by demons, one detective said. She was possessed by belief. Klara's home was demolished soon after. The cage was destroyed, the basement filled with concrete, but no one in Kujim ever forgot what had been hidden there. Her sons survived, but innocence did not. Klara Mawerova killed through obedience, faith twisted into torment, but the next mother killed through grief, a soldier's wife who lost her mind to war and despair, turning her own home into a battleground. Her name was Schenecker.
I
Everyone here hates me.
She was a mother, a wife, and a soldier's partner. But in one quiet Florida neighborhood, she became something else entirely. The woman who turned grief into execution. Tampa, Florida, January 28, 2011. A cold front drifts through the Gulf air. Inside a spacious suburban home, 49-year-old Julie Schenecker loads a revolver. Upstairs, her 2 teenage children sleep, unaware that their mother has made a decision she cannot undo. When police arrive the next morning, they find her sitting on the back porch, covered in blood, calmly smoking a cigarette. Her son Beau, 13, lies slumped in the car outside. Her daughter Calix, 16, is upstairs in her bed, both shot in the head, both killed by the woman who raised them. When officers ask what happened, she answers with chilling simplicity. They talked back. I was tired of it. Julie Schenecker's story begins far from violence. She grew up in Texas, bright and ambitious. She studied Russian, joined the army, and built a career in military intelligence. There she met Colonel Parker Schenecker, a respected officer with decades of service. They married, moved frequently, and raised 2 children who seemed perfect from the outside. Honor students, athletes, well-mannered, and kind. Friends described Julie as elegant, funny, intelligent. But behind the neat suburban image, her mind was unraveling. Years of depression had hollowed her out. She suffered from bipolar disorder, and her medications shifted constantly. Her husband was often deployed, leaving her alone with the children for months at a time. She began drinking heavily, self-medicating to silence the noise inside her head. By 2010, her life was a blur of pills, alcohol, and manic episodes. Neighbors noticed her trembling hands, her vacant stares, her sudden bursts of laughter, but no one imagined what she was planning. In her journals, later found by police, she wrote about discipline, about ending the suffering, and about her frustration with her children's growing independence. She wrote, "They mock me, they disrespect me. I will show them love, my way." The morning of the killings was routine. She drove to a gun shop, bought a .38 caliber revolver, and a box of hollow point bullets. The clerk remembered her smiling. She said it was for protection. Later that afternoon, she picked up her son Beau from soccer practice. He joked with her in the car, then rolled his eyes, something every teenager does. She pulled the car over. She turned, raised the gun, and fired. Then she drove home, walked upstairs, sat on her daughter's bed, and shot her too. She washed the gun, poured herself a glass of wine, and waited for the police to arrive. When her husband Parker returned from deployment, he found not a home, but a crime scene. He collapsed outside, screaming their names. The news traveled fast. A decorated colonel's wife had killed their children. The press called it the Schenecker family tragedy. But to those who read her letters, it was something darker than tragedy. It was intention. During her trial in 2014, prosecutors described her as calculated and aware. They played her confession, where she said she planned the killings for days, waiting until her husband was away so he couldn't stop her. The defense argued insanity. They said she was lost in psychosis, unable to tell right from wrong. Her mental health records showed decades of struggle, suicide attempts, hospital stays, medication failures. But her actions before and after the murders, buying the gun, cleaning the weapon, and calling her parents afterward to say, "The kids are gone, I'm sorry," all pointed to control. She knew, and she did it anyway. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours. They found her guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. When the verdict was read, she smiled faintly, then whispered, "I understand." The judge sentenced her to life in prison without parole. Her husband sat silently in the courtroom, a wedding ring still on his finger. In a statement afterward, he said, "There are no winners here, only victims." In prison, Julie remains medicated and subdued. She writes daily, prays, and occasionally paints. She says she talks to her children in dreams. She believes they have forgiven her, but forgiveness cannot rewrite the truth. Her journals are still studied by criminologists, a portrait of a mind torn between control and collapse. They reveal not hatred, but a warped sense of mercy, a belief that death could end the chaos. She once wrote, "When the voices stop, I'll finally rest." The voices never stopped. They simply grew quiet behind bars. Julie Schenecker's story is the final collapse of order. A woman who tried to impose discipline and instead created destruction. She was not driven by greed, vengeance, or ideology. She was driven by exhaustion, the kind that corrodes reason and turns love into violence. She didn't kill because she hated her children, one psychologist said. She killed because she couldn't stand to feel powerless anymore. Julie Schenecker killed out of despair and delusion, but the next woman killed out of worship, a mother who saw her children as sacrifices in a distorted vision of purity. Her name was Cara Alexander. She said God told her to do it. She said her children were chosen and that death would save their souls. But when police entered her home, they didn't find salvation. They found sacrifice. Tulsa, Oklahoma, December 2008. A neighbor calls the police after noticing something strange. A strong smell, no movement inside the small brick house, and a mother who hadn't been seen for days. Officers knock on the door, no answer. They push it open and step into silence. The lights are off, the air is thick. And on the living room floor, they find Cara Alexander, 34 years old, kneeling beside two small bodies wrapped in sheets. Her daughters, Desiree, 5, and Destiny, 3, are lying side by side, their faces calm, as if asleep. But they are not sleeping. Cara sits quietly between them, mumbling prayers under her breath, a Bible open on her lap. When an officer asks what happened, she looks up and says, "They're with God now. I did what I was told." For weeks leading up to that night, Cara's mind had been unraveling. She was deeply religious, but her faith had taken a dangerous turn. Friends described her as kind, devoted, and gentle until the voices began. She started telling people she could hear angels, that God was warning her of evil forces. She said her children were special and that the world was too dark for them to stay in it. Her family grew worried. They begged her to seek help, but Cara refused, saying, "Doctors couldn't cure Gon's plan." The final days before the murders were a blur of paranoia and prayer. She isolated herself, locked the doors, and stopped answering calls. Investigators later pieced together the timeline. On the night of December 22nd, Cara dressed her daughters in clean pajamas, read them from the Bible, and told them they were going home to heaven. She gave them sleeping pills, waited until they drifted off, then smothered them with a pillow, one after the other. When it was done, she bathed their bodies, laid them on the bed, and wrapped them carefully in blankets. Then she sat down beside them and prayed for days, waiting for a sign from God. Neighbors grew suspicious when mail piled up. One finally called the police. When officers arrived, they found candles burning throughout the house, religious symbols taped to the walls, and pages of scripture scattered on the floor. Cara was calm as they led her away. She kept repeating, "They're not dead, they're saved." Her voice never trembled, her faith never broke. At first, police thought it was a straightforward case of religious delusion, a mother who lost her grip on reality. But as they dug deeper, they found traces of planning. She had stopped paying bills, written farewell letters, and given away toys and clothes. She had prepared for this, not as an act of rage, but as a ritual. When questioned by detectives, she explained her reasoning clearly. "The world is ending. I couldn't let them suffer. God said it was time." Her tone was eerily serene. There was no hesitation, no regret. Her trial in 2009 was brief but haunting. The prosecution described her as cold and calculating. The defense described her as broken and insane. Psychiatrists testified that she suffered from severe paranoid schizophrenia. They said she genuinely believed her actions were holy. The courtroom fell silent when recordings of her interviews were played. In one, she said softly, "I know they're in heaven because I sent them there myself." The jury found her not guilty by reason of insanity. She was committed indefinitely to a secure psychiatric facility. Years later, hospital staff described her as calm, polite, and deeply religious still. She spends her days reading scripture and painting. She tells nurses she will see her girls again soon. She no longer remembers every detail of that night, but she remembers the peace she felt after it was done. Cara Alexander's story is one of faith turned toxic. The moment belief loses its anchor and drifts into madness. She didn't kill out of hatred or even despair. She killed out of conviction. And that is what makes her story so terrifying. Not chaos, but certainty. She wasn't a monster, said one investigator. She was a mother who thought she was saving her children from hell. Her words, her prayers, her calmness, they all belonged to a mind consumed by delusion, a mind where God and death had become the same thing. Today, the house where it happened stands empty. Neighbors pass by without speaking of it. The windows are boarded up, but sometimes candles still appear in the window, placed there by strangers who never knew her, but still feel the weight of what she did. Kara believed she was giving her daughters eternal life. All she gave them was an early grave. Kara Alexander killed out of faith twisted into madness, but not all evil hides behind belief. Some hides behind charisma, charm, and the promise of love. And when that mask finally slips, it reveals something far colder, the face of true predation. These were the most evil killers of all time, not because of how they killed, but because of why. 10 women, 10 mothers, 10 stories that shattered the illusion that evil only wears a man's face. Julissa Thaler, who hid her son in the trunk. Karen Matthews, who turned a lie into fame. Louise Porton, who killed for freedom. Shirley Turner, who drowned her child in revenge. Susan Eubanks, who murdered for control. Dominique Cottrez, who buried silence in her garden. Brittany Pilkington, who mistook mercy for death. Klara Mawarova, who tortured in the name of faith. Julie Schenecker, who disciplined with bullets. Kara Alexander, who called murder salvation. 10 lives, 10 choices. Each one a reminder that the face of evil isn't always what we expect. Sometimes, it smiles. If you want more stories that explore the darkness behind ordinary lives, subscribe. Join us again, where love turns cold and the line between good and evil disappears.